Hello guys, welcome back to the Libertad, and here's Titty Hunter.
Today we're talking the 1998 Libertad. Stay tuned.
Your winner by unanimous decision, and still World Heavyweight Champion of the World, the Mexican Libertad! Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Titty Hunter!
So I meant to record this video several days ago, and as I was planning to record it, I realized one of the Facebook groups had a live ongoing auction for a 98 MS69 1-ounce Libertad, but it was the die chip variety, which we will go into detail around today. And then I said, all right, let me wait for that auction to finish up, because then we could actually talk about what with the price that coin went for, and we'll even discuss today how rare it is. So before we talk about the 98, I just want to talk shop a little bit. Something that was on my mind as it pertains to what's happening right now. Everyone's still talking about 2025 mintage for the Libertads, but this is what's happening right now, this Dinosaur set. But before we talk about the Dinosaur set, let's talk about the Zoology set. So it's basically a cool little set that comes in a little like folder type display. There's probably a fancier name than that. I can't think of it right now, but it comes like this. And this one came with basically 7 fractionals, and they make the silver edition. And then there's also 2 other editions of different metals, but the silver is the most sought after, the most popular. And then they had a lot of great success with this set. No one really knows the mintages exactly, but there's speculation out there, and they initially sold these out. They sold out quick, and the speculation is something like, they minted 1,500 to 2,000 of them. But then what happened was, I think it was like a month or 2 later, then Casa de Moneda on Instagram, it was shown that, we're going to do another sale of these. So it sounds like they went back into the woodwork, minted another 1,500, 2,000 or so, and sold those, and you had to go in line in person to get one of these. And then I guess because of the popularity and how well they did, they created the Dinosaur set. And this one's actually only 6 coins, fractional silver coins. Again, they come in a couple of different metals. I just went for the silver. But this was also very popular. Same thing again. They minted some amount. Everybody's guessing around 2,000 or so. They went back into the woodwork. They said, okay, another batch coming out on XYZ date. And that happened. But now what is happening? They announced last week on Instagram. They were like, today's the 13th. So 13th, 14th, 15th of August, they're releasing even more. So last time around, they did 2 releases of the Zoology set. Now they're doing 3 releases of the same Dinosaur set. So the mintage is probably even higher, even though it's saying, limited edition. So thought that's interesting. Thought something for folks to kind of keep in mind when they're thinking that, they're only going to make 500 2025 Libertads. It doesn't make out any sense logic-wise why they'd crank out a bunch of dinosaurs, but not Libertads. Something else I wanted to comment regarding these, I saw when I saw the post from Casa de Moneda on Instagram, somebody was complaining. They're like, not all of us live down in Mexico. We can't wait there online. You should be offering these online. And my thoughts to that, and it's not just confined to coin collecting, but I think it goes for like comics, it goes for cards, it goes for sneakers. I think right now we're in a world of where all this e-commerce, suddenly the concept of bots comes into play, and then those with the big money that can afford, a good bot software is gonna run you like up there, like 20,000. Like, that's not out of the question. And so what's happening in all these hobbies is when you have it online and you have people that can afford these expensive software, these bots, they're just getting a concentrated amounts of the items into their hands and they're reselling it. I honestly miss the good old days where people used to wait on a line for a pair of sneakers and you got your one pair of sneakers. So, to be honest, even though I'm not going to be flying down to Mexico to stand in a line, I think it's pretty cool to give more than a concentrated few access to the coins that, hey, if you're willing to get on that line and wait there for a long time, hey, you deserve your set. And even if they're going to flip it, well, at least more people are in on the action that is as opposed to just a handful just trying to control everything. That's my thought on that. So as you can already imagine, for the 98, it's on the scarcer side of all the mintages across years. It ranks at number 4 in terms of scarcity, 67,000 in mintage. You know, when I first started collecting Libertads in 2021, the 98 was considered the crown jewel. It was kind of like just flying under the weeds that, that 2019 antique, there was only 1,000 mintage. I think people didn't process it too well. Some people consider the antique finish to not be aesthetically pleasing. The other underlying demand factor, I think, is for the registries for Libertads. The antiques, both the 2019 and the 2018, count for the MS set. So when you want to build out your points, they are actually count as varieties in there and they count for points. So that definitely has generated demand. But a 98, when I was first looking to pick up a 98 MS69 in 2021, it was at $700. And since then, it's really taken off. Like, it's at about 3,000, and we'll talk about it shortly. The die chip or the crowned eagle. I even want to call it like a yarmulke eagle, like a Jewish eagle. And when we zoom in later on, I'll show you my thoughts on that. But so yeah, this is a very scarce coin. It was considered the crown jewel. It's still very much in demand. So an MS69 pretty much went from 700 to about 3,000 or so. And the die chip variety, the one that I was alluding to earlier when I made a comment about an auction on the Facebook group, that one went for $4,100. So they're really getting up there in price. So let's take a look at the population reports at NGC and PCGS. You'll notice on NGC that there's only one line item for the 98. I'm just pointing that out because when we look at the PCGS side, we're going to see 2 line items. So it's just one line item on the 98 on a population of 968 currently graded, the top pop of 70, and there's 8 of them out there. A couple of things to point out here. I had mentioned in an earlier video what I call kind of like the crack out effect. So because like your 97, 98, 99 are like the most sought after in this era, they're older coins. I mean, obviously the 2019 antique is highly sought after, but the grand majority of those grade 70, so no one's really cracking them out to resubmit them. But in terms of like 97, 98, 99, and definitely even like the 91 type 2, the crack out effect, again, to elaborate, is, if someone sends in the raw coin to get graded, they might get a 67 or they might get a 68. And, they put it under the scope. They felt it was a higher grade. And, there's variance out there. Humans are humans. You have different graders. If you catch them at a bad time, they might give you a bad grade. If you catch them at a good time and they're happy that day, hey, that might influence them and skew the grade to the higher side. And so what people do is they receive the coin. They're not happy with their 67 or 68. They crack it out of the slab, resubmit raw again, and then, oh, great times. This time around, I got graded to 69. I got lucky. I got a good grader who was probably skewed to the upside, grades more favorably than others, perhaps. Or they caught him on a good day, and now you suddenly have an MS69 when previously it was a 67 or a 68. That's just a hypothetical example, but that's happening. And quite comfortably, we could say that, 10%. So like 96 or 97 of these coins are being double counted because folks are cracking them out looking for the higher grade. And it might be even higher, and let me show you why. The interesting thing about the 98, it is pretty much the highest population on the MS side in terms of details grade. Pretty much 10% of the total population has been graded details. So details could be a coin that's excessively scratched up and polished. Someone went to clean it excessively and tried to pawn it off on eBay as if it was a really nice coin. Someone who doesn't know any better says, oh, 98's highly regarded. It's a price pretty high. I want my graded, just to have it, graded and it has value. Or, aside from the cleaning, you could have scratches, whatever else. So there's a whole lot of them. There's 10% of these. That's a considerable amount. So you imagine you have 10% of the total population at NGC. That's details. And you probably have another 10%, or what I think more, because if you have 10% at details, there's probably a whole lot of cracking out. It wouldn't even shock me if it's closer to 20% or crackouts. Just a guess, but it's at least another 97 coins that are double counted because they've been cracked out. So that's how things look like on the NGC side in terms of graded population. At PCGS, here on their report, population report, you will see there's now 2 line items for the 98. You have just your regular 98 Mexico Onza Libertad silver, and then you have another line item 98 Silver Libertad die chip at Eagle's Head. So this is what I was alluding to earlier. Some folks call it the die chip. These grading companies are calling it die chip. Other people call it the ground eagle. And to me, it kind of looks like a yarmulke. And when we zoom in, you'll see that. But PCGS has 640 of just the standard, and then 39 of the die chip. So unfortunately, on the NGC side, we don't have any line of sight into differentiating die chip at Eagle's Head versus non-die chip. To illustrate the die chip in terms of NGC side, they label it as an error. Here I'm showing you, I went to an NGC verification page. Some folks that had their slab with the mint error shown on it, I kind of looked up the cert numbers just to see what it looks like. And what this tells us, it's MS65, this example here, but it's a mint error. Nowhere on the NGC population report we were looking at do they differentiate for errors. So under that column that had the number of 65s, if we go take a look, 98, there were 58 65s for NGC, graded NGC. Well, we don't have a way of telling how many of them are error 65s versus just regular 65. So we lose that line of sight of, what percentage of the graded ones at NGC are die chips. But they, like I said, they label it mint error. I did notice some differences. This particular one I pulled up from one of the folks that shared their coin on Facebook. It wrote in here, pedigree die chip on Eagle's Head. And I just happened to go look at another one, a 68. Take a second to load here. But this one doesn't have that pedigree written up here on the verification page, but it does have mint error and MS68. So NGC is currently not acknowledging this, which I think is kind of BS, to be honest. They're handing out double die reverses like so easy, it's almost laughable, but you're labeling this as an error. Kind of strange to me. The $1 million question on everybody's mind is, this die chip or crowned eagle or yarmulke eagle, it's rare and everyone wants to know how many could there exist. And it's kind of hard to get a good line of sight into that. We can make an estimate, but like I've mentioned many times, for most years, less than 1% of the mintage has been graded by one of the grading companies. 98 is an exception, but I think I showed you why it's an exception. It had almost 100 details grade, So a lot of people are just looking to have theirs graded because it's a valuable coin. And historically, it was considered the crown jewel of the whole Libertad set. And so there was an overabundance of folks trying to get those graded. So for that, the 98, there's actually greater than 1% of the mintage has been graded. But the only way we can make any type of estimate, and it's just an estimate, and it could change from 1 month to another if a bunch more 98s start getting graded, we have to depend on these PCGS statistics, that there's a total of 39 die chip varietals versus 640 of the regular. And so you want to make an estimate. If you had to make an estimate, we would say, 39 divided by 39 plus 640. So of the total graded at NGC, about 5.7% of the total mintage we could then estimate. And this is, like I said, just an estimate. It could change very drastically if a lot more coins get graded. And if we were to apply that percentage to the 67,000, we get our estimate that there's about 3,848 die chips out there. Like I said, just an estimate, but this is based on the only available data we have out there to kind of estimate that. We don't, unless PCGS had like 20,000 graded, and then how many were die chips. The other nuance is the die chip variant actually showed up in 2021. I saw it. The first die chip graded showed up for auction on Great Collections, and it went for under $1,000 at the time. Like it was a new thing. And so die chip really is a very, very new variety, considering the coin was minted in 1998. So we're estimating that there's 3,848 die chips, and now, okay, what the heck is a die chip, Titty? And so if we look, and we're going to zoom in, we're going to put it under the scope, but just to show you right here with the naked eye, just look at the head of the eagle. To me, it looks like a yarmulke. That's why I love saying it. Looks like a yarmulke, a crown. They call it a die chip. And so that's kind of what it looks like. Compare that to a standard one. You see the eagle's head versus the die chip variety. So let's look at the eagle under the scope. This is a non-die chip. Just see, you have the eagle's head, and that's kind of like to the left of the eye, staring at it. It's kind of what a regular standard eagle looks like on the obverse side of the coin. And now let's look at the die chip. There you go. Like I said, a yarmulke. Maybe President Sheinbaum needs one of these. But yeah, the die chip, the crowned eagle, that's kind of what it looks like. It makes me think of something strange that happens, and I'll focus on the 98s in general, and not even just the MSs, but the proofs. So it's interesting that this one is substantially rare, as we just took an estimate of it. And the one without this die chip, an MS69, they're comping at about 3,000, give or take, just over or just under. And this one's much more rare, and it just comped at 4,100. And I've heard of one other transaction, and I don't know the exact number, but it was above 4,000. The person wouldn't tell me the exact number, but so much rare, and we're only talking about the difference between 3,000 and 4,100, which is kind of strange. You would expect it to be a lot higher. I guess after a certain price, there comes kind of like a threshold of how much people are willing to spend. And that, what's more interesting is, so someone's willing to spend $3,000 on a standard, a 98 MS69, but the proof 98 in 69, that coin is incredibly scarce. It's only 500 mintage, actual 500 mintage, the 98 proof, not MS proof. And you know, if the MS69 is going for 3,000, the proof's only at about like, you know, there's a lot of variance out there between like private transactions and what's listed publicly, but you got to figure it's at no more than 10,000 and it should be much higher. So it's kind of strange, you know, that these rare varietals within the 98, that just the standard one commands so much money, but the rare varietals you would expect so much more premium, but it's just not there. It almost feels as if, you know, at a certain dollar number amount, folks are not willing to go above that. But we'll see. We are seeing new collectors come in, and you know, I anticipate prices to go higher. So it's going to be interesting in the coming years, to see how prices continue to trend. Click that subscribe button for more data-driven coin analysis.